What if love isn't what you think it is? What if everything you feel, every heartbeat, every obsession, every promise of forever, is nothing more than a sequence of chemical reactions designed to trick your brain into reproduction? It sounds harsh, cold, even cynical, but science has been quietly revealing something uncomfortable. Love, as we experience it, may be nothing more than a beautiful illusion created by your biology to keep the species alive. At its core, love is not magic. It's chemistry. When you first fall for someone, your brain enters a state that is nearly indistinguishable from addiction. You feel euphoria. You lose appetite. You obsess. You can't stop thinking about them. And that's because your brain is flooding with a specific cocktail of neurotransmitters: dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin, and a curious compound called phenylethylamine, sometimes referred to as the love drug. Phenylethylamine, or PEA, is an organic compound produced in your brain that acts as a natural stimulant. It's structurally similar to amphetamines and is thought to be responsible for that initial rush of infatuation, the butterflies, the racing heart, the sudden inability to think about anything else. When PEA levels spike, dopamine increases, and together they activate the brain's reward circuit. This is the same circuit triggered by drugs like cocaine. That's not a metaphor. That's measurable neuroscience. This is why being in love can feel so consuming. You're not just emotionally attached, you're neurologically hijacked. MRI studies show that when people look at photos of someone they're in love with, the same brain areas light up that are associated with drug cravings. You're high on another human being. And like any high, it comes with a crash. That early stage of infatuation, what scientists call limerence, usually lasts between 6 months to 2 years. Then, PEA levels begin to drop. Dopamine decreases. The thrill fades. And what's left is either the foundation for long-term attachment or nothing at all. But here's the twist. Our culture rarely tells us that love is a chemical cycle. Instead, we grow up believing in soulmates, in forever, in the idea that true love lasts forever and only grows stronger. This idea is not based on biology. It's a cultural myth reinforced by religion, media, and social tradition. And yet our brains continue to chase the highs of that initial phase over and over again. When the PEA-fueled euphoria fades, your brain doesn't want to let go. That's where oxytocin and vasopressin come in. Oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone, is released during physical touch, intimacy, and especially during sex. It creates a sense of trust, security, and emotional attachment. Vasopressin, similarly, is linked to territorial behavior and monogamous bonding, at least in certain mammals. These chemicals encourage long-term connection. But here's the uncomfortable part. They don't always succeed. If humans were biologically hardwired for lifelong monogamy, infidelity wouldn't be so common. According to research, about 20–25% of married individuals admit to having cheated. And those are just the ones who admit it. So what's going on? Is monogamy natural, or is it imposed? Anthropologists argue that humans are mildly polygynous. That means our evolutionary past includes both pair bonding and multiple partners. In early tribal societies, child-rearing and resources often dictated partnership models more than emotion. Romantic love, as we define it today, is a recent invention, barely a few centuries old. And yet, from the moment we're born, we're taught to seek the one. Books, songs, movies, religions all reinforce the belief that finding a permanent partner is not just normal, but necessary. This social programming runs so deep that even people who consciously reject monogamy often experience guilt or jealousy because their emotional responses are shaped by years of internalized expectation. Religion plays a massive role in this. Most major religions frame love and marriage not just as emotional bonds, but as moral duties. Christianity teaches that love is patient, kind, and eternal. Islam encourages marriage as a foundation of society. Hinduism treats love as sacred, but these aren't scientific truths. They're systems of belief that evolved to maintain order, stability, and social control. That doesn't mean they're wrong, but it does mean that what we think of as true love might be more of a cultural construct than a biological fact. The question then becomes, if love is chemical and monogamy is cultural, what does that make obsession? Obsession is what happens when the chemical loop doesn't close, when dopamine stays high, but the reward is uncertain, when the person you desire becomes unavailable, unresponsive, or distant. Your brain doesn't shut down the circuit, it amplifies it. This is called the frustration attraction effect. The less you can have them, the more your brain wants them. This is why people become addicted to toxic relationships. The inconsistency in attention creates a variable reward system, the same system used in gambling. You don't get love steadily. You get it in unpredictable bursts, and your brain becomes desperate to chase the next hit. So is love real? Or is it just biology wearing a mask? That depends on how you define real. Your feelings are real. Your attachment is real. But the mechanisms that create those feelings are measurable, reproducible, and subject to manipulation. In fact, scientists have successfully used electrical stimulation to trigger feelings of affection and attachment in lab animals. In humans, experimental therapies involving oxytocin sprays and dopamine agonists have shown that we can artificially enhance feelings of trust and closeness. It's not science fiction. It's science. But that doesn't mean love is meaningless. In fact, the opposite might be true. The fact that something as profound as love can emerge from neurons, hormones, and evolutionary pressures is not depressing. It's miraculous. It means that your body has evolved to generate beauty, connection, and intimacy as a survival tool. It means that something deeply personal is also deeply universal. Still, knowing how it works gives you power. It allows you to ask, is this love I feel, or is it just a chemical storm? Is this connection healthy, or am I addicted to the rush? Am I choosing this person, or is my brain making the choice for me? Because once you understand how love hijacks your brain, you can start to recognize the difference between real connection and chemical illusion. If love is a biochemical illusion, then how much of our behavior is truly ours? Think about how people behave when they're in love. Not just the euphoric honeymoon phase, but the irrational decisions, the self-sacrifice, the jealousy, the sudden shifts in personality. You might think you're acting from the heart, but in reality, your brain is running a program that's millions of years old. A program designed to maximize survival and reproduction, not happiness. From a neurological perspective, love alters cognition. Studies show that being in love decreases activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for critical thinking, judgment, and impulse control. That's why people in love often ignore red flags, overlook toxic behavior, or idealize their partners. Your brain literally shuts down your skepticism in order to reinforce the bond. It's not poetic, it's survival. In evolutionary terms, attachment increases the odds that two individuals will stay together long enough to raise offspring. In ancestral environments, this meant better protection, shared resources, and greater chances of passing on genes. The love you feel isn't about you, it's about replication. But our world has changed. We no longer live in survival-based tribal units. We have birth control, social mobility, individualism, and yet our brains are still wired for strategies forged in the Pleistocene. That mismatch is why modern love is often chaotic. We expect eternal happiness from a brain that was built to chase novelty and survival. We want stable, long-term relationships from neurochemical systems that evolve to form short-term bonds followed by reproductive spacing. And we punish ourselves when our biology doesn't align with our ideals. Monogamy, as a concept, is not universal across species. Only about 3 to 5% of mammals form monogamous pair bonds. Most others engage in polygamous or promiscuous mating systems. In humans, the picture is mixed. Anthropological studies of hunter-gatherer societies, the closest model we have to early human social structure, show a wide range of mating patterns, from serial monogamy to communal parenting. What we consider normal today is heavily shaped by Western religious and legal traditions, not biology. The rise of agriculture, private property, and inheritance systems made it socially advantageous to control reproduction. Marriage became a contract, less about love and more about economics, land, and lineage. The romantic ideal of love as destiny? That's a product of medieval European literature and 20th century cinema, not human evolution. And yet we cling to the story. Not because it's true, but because it gives meaning to the chaos. Love gives us structure. It offers a narrative. It says, you will find someone, you will merge with them, and together you will transcend the loneliness of existence. That's powerful. That's why even when we know the science, we still believe. But belief doesn't change biology, and biology doesn't always cooperate. Let's talk about heartbreak. From a physiological standpoint, heartbreak activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex and insula, both involved in processing distress, light up when we're rejected. This isn't metaphorical pain. It's neurologically real. That's why people going through breakups often report chest tightness, loss of appetite, insomnia, and even immune system suppression. Your brain is responding to a loss of connection the same way it would respond to injury or trauma. And what's worse, the same circuits that reinforced the love now become sources of withdrawal. You were addicted to a person. Now your supply is gone. Your brain scrambles to understand what happened. It replays memories, searches for explanations, and sometimes convinces you to go back, even when it's destructive. That's not love talking. That's dopamine withdrawal. And then there's obsession. When love doesn't follow the expected path, when it's unreciprocated or suddenly severed, the brain often responds by amplifying the emotional signal. This is known as the loss incentive effect. The brain becomes hyper-focused on regaining the lost object, not because of love itself, but because of the interruption in the expected reward cycle. Obsessive love is not a deeper love. It's a malfunction in the system. It's your brain trapped in a feedback loop, unable to recalibrate. Some people become consumed by it. They stalk, they spiral. They idealize a version of the person that may never have existed, and they call it passion. But in reality, it's a system error. We also need to talk about infidelity, not as moral failure, but as biological strategy. Cheating is common not because people are evil, but because human mating strategies are diverse. Evolutionarily, spreading genes increases reproductive success. For men, multiple partners mean more offspring. For women, the strategy is more nuanced, securing a stable partner while also potentially accessing superior genes from others. This is not a justification, it's an explanation. Modern relationships are built on a foundation of ideals that are in constant tension with our evolutionary wiring. We demand loyalty, permanence, and emotional exclusivity from a system that evolved for flexibility, adaptability, and redundancy. And this tension creates guilt, anxiety, shame. People feel broken for wanting more than one person, or for losing desire, or for being attracted to others. But these aren't personal failures. They're echoes of a brain still operating on ancient logic. The problem isn't love. The problem is pretending that love is simple. It's not. It's a complex interplay of biology, psychology, culture, and personal history. It's shaped by your childhood, your hormones, your attachments, your traumas, your genes, your myths. And that complexity is why love can feel like both salvation and madness. Because it is both. It's the reason we build civilizations. It's the reason we write music, make art, go to war, raise families. It's the force that binds and breaks us. And even when we understand it, truly, chemically, neurologically understand it, we still crave it. Because love at its core is not just a feeling, it's a need, and needs are not rational. They are embedded, programmed. And if we don't see them for what they are, they control us in ways we don't even notice. So the question isn't whether love is real. It is. But the version we're chasing? That might just be the biggest illusion of all. If love is a need built into our biology, then it becomes clear why so many people are willing to suffer for it. They don't just tolerate pain, they expect it. Our culture has normalized the idea that love hurts, that heartbreak is a rite of passage, that jealousy means caring, and that suffering is part of something beautiful. But that normalization is dangerous. When pain is romanticized, it stops being questioned. We begin to see red flags as signs of passion. We excuse controlling behavior as protection. We interpret emotional instability as intensity. This is not love, it's dysfunction disguised as destiny. And it thrives because it taps into our most ancient programming, the drive to bond, to belong, to not be alone. Loneliness, after all, is not just unpleasant, it's biologically threatening. Social isolation activates the same neural circuits as hunger or thirst. Humans evolved to survive in groups. Being excluded from the tribe meant danger, death. So when someone pulls away from you emotionally, or disappears, or rejects you, your brain reacts with panic. That panic isn't weakness, it's ancient wiring. And love exploits that wiring. When love is present, you feel safe, anchored, seen. When it's removed, your sense of reality collapses. That's why breakups often feel like identity loss. You didn't just lose a person, you lost a version of yourself that existed only in that connection. That collapse can lead to obsession, depression, or even psychosis in extreme cases. Studies have shown that people experiencing intense romantic rejection exhibit brain activity similar to those with clinical depression. Their serotonin levels drop, their cortisol spikes, their immune function weakens. Love leaves a physiological scar. And yet, people go back, even after betrayal, even after pain, even after years of emotional damage. Why? Because the brain remembers the high. It craves the hit. Like any addict, it tells itself that maybe this time it will be different. Maybe this time the love will heal instead of hurt. But the brain isn't interested in your well-being. It's interested in survival. That's why love isn't logical. That's why people stay in broken relationships. That's why some fall in love with someone who clearly doesn't care. That's why even abusive dynamics can be misinterpreted as deep emotional bonds. Because your brain doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about the bond. The bond is the evolutionary tool. Your emotions are just the interface. And once you see that clearly, you start to ask different questions. You stop asking, why doesn't this person love me? And you start asking, why is my brain rewarding this pain? You stop asking, is this person the one? And start asking, what patterns is my brain repeating? That shift is powerful because it returns agency. And in a world where most people are slaves to their emotional loops, agency is liberation. But even with awareness, the system is hard to resist. The stories we're told reinforce the loop. Fairy tales, rom-coms, pop songs. They all deliver the same message. Love is supposed to save you. But what if it doesn't? What if love isn't salvation? What if it's just another mechanism? One that biology uses to ensure continuity of the species, while culture uses it to ensure conformity. In that light, everything changes. You begin to see love as a construct layered on top of instinct. You begin to see relationships as neural contracts, temporary agreements between brains seeking safety and stimulation. You begin to see that attraction is not about magic. It's about symmetry, scent, familiarity, trauma bonding, and subconscious mirroring. And yet, even in that reductionist view, there's still something profound. Because the fact that a brain, this 3-pound lump of matter, can generate something as complex as love is still staggering. Just because it's biological doesn't mean it's meaningless. Your hunger for love is real. Your pain when it's lost is real. But understanding where it comes from doesn't diminish it. It reveals it. It gives you the tools to navigate it with clarity instead of fantasy. It allows you to love without surrendering your identity, to attach without addiction, To bond without blindness. Because love, when seen clearly, is not weakness. It's strength informed by understanding. It's vulnerability held in conscious choice. It's biology, yes, but biology made conscious. And that, perhaps, is what separates us from the animals. Not that we love, but that we can choose how we love, and whether or not we let it control us. So the next time you feel that rush, the heart racing, the palms sweating, the thoughts spiraling, pause. Ask yourself, is this love? Or is it a chemical echo? And even if it is, does that make it any less beautiful? Or does it make it even more miraculous? Because perhaps the greatest power isn't in falling in love blindly. It's in understanding what love really is, and still choosing to feel it anyway. If love is a chemical lie, then what happens when we fully understand the machinery behind it? Does that awareness make us immune? Or simply more dangerous? Today, science is advancing to the point where emotions like love are not just observable, they're modifiable. Pharmaceutical companies have already developed compounds that influence attachment, bonding, and attraction. Oxytocin sprays, dopamine agonists, SSRIs that blunt the highs and lows of emotional connection. In labs, scientists can stimulate specific regions of the brain to create feelings of affection or desire. They can enhance trust artificially. They can suppress fear of loss. We're entering an era where love may no longer be something that happens to you. It may become something you choose or engineer. This raises a fundamental question. If we can control love, does it lose its meaning? Imagine a world where romantic connection can be dialed up or down, where heartbreak can be treated with a prescription, where compatibility is measured in neurotransmitter balance instead of personality. Some would call that dystopian. Others would call it freedom. Because if love is chemistry, and chemistry can be manipulated, then so can suffering. No more heartbreak. No more obsession. No more addiction to people who harm us. No more dependency masked as passion. That's not science fiction. That's a near-future possibility, and it forces us to confront something deeply uncomfortable. Maybe the thing we've romanticized the most is the thing that has enslaved us the most. Love has shaped empires, destroyed kingdoms, started wars, ended lives, and at its root, it may be just a glitch in the brain, a deeply useful but ultimately manipulable biological trick. But here's the paradox. The fact that love is chemical doesn't make it less powerful. It makes it more terrifying, because it means that we are vulnerable, programmable, predictable, that our deepest feelings are not divine but constructed, that even our souls, if such things exist, are running on circuitry shaped by evolution. So what does it mean to love with awareness? It means knowing the biology without being ruled by it. It means seeing your emotions not as absolute truth, but as signals, valuable, beautiful, but not infallible. It means stepping back from the narrative and asking, does this serve me, or am I serving it? Love, after all, is not the enemy. The illusion is. The illusion that love is fate, that it justifies all behavior, that it's supposed to hurt, that it must be exclusive, that it's the end goal of existence. When we dismantle that illusion, we're not left with emptiness. We're left with clarity. You can still love. You can still fall. You can still feel everything, completely, but you're no longer possessed by it. You're participating in it. That's the difference between control and consciousness. And the truth is, most people never make that shift. Most live their entire lives in loops, craving the rush, fearing the withdrawal, idealizing connection, and blaming themselves when it all collapses. But you don't have to. You can love like a scientist, deeply, curiously, consciously. You can observe the rush of dopamine and still enjoy the ride. You can feel the pull of oxytocin and still choose who you trust. You can experience the ache of heartbreak and know that it will pass, because it always does. The chemicals always rebalance. The system always resets. And when you know that, love stops being a cage. It becomes a canvas, something you can shape, build, rebuild, walk away from, return to, without shame, without fantasy, without pretending that it will save you. Because it won't. Nothing will. But that doesn't make it worthless. In fact, it might be the most human thing about us, that we can know the science, see the illusion, feel the manipulation, and still decide to love anyway. Not blindly, but bravely, with eyes open, with heart steady, with the understanding that love is not what completes you, but what you choose to give, knowing that it could hurt, knowing that it might end, knowing that it's never guaranteed, and doing it anyway. That's not weakness, that's strength. That's real love. Not the chemical storm, not the myth of destiny, not the addiction to validation, but the choice to feel, to connect, to stay present in a world that constantly pulls us into distraction, into fantasy, into escape. Because at the end of all the science, all the studies, all the neurological diagrams and evolutionary theories, we're still just people, searching, longing, yearning to be understood. And maybe love, for all its illusions, for all its tricks and circuitry and hormones, is still the closest thing we have to a mirror. A mirror that shows us not who we are when we're alone, but who we can become when we're truly seen. If love is a mirror, then what is it reflecting? Sometimes it reflects your hopes, other times your fears, and more often than not, it reflects the parts of you that were never healed. Because love doesn't just bond people, it exposes them. That's why relationships can feel like therapy or like war. They awaken childhood wounds. They trigger abandonment, insecurity, jealousy, inadequacy. Not because the other person is doing something wrong, but because love brings everything to the surface. And yet no one teaches us how to handle that. We're taught how to fall in love, but not how to stay in love. We're shown the spark, but not the wiring. We're told how it should feel, but not how to navigate what it reveals. The brain doesn't distinguish between emotional and physical threats. So when love feels uncertain or unstable, it triggers the same fight or flight response as danger. You might lash out, you might shut down, you might cling. Not because you're weak, but because your system is reacting to perceived loss. And this is where love becomes a mirror not of beauty, but of survival patterns. Some people pursue unavailable partners. Others sabotage connection the moment it becomes real. Some repeat toxic cycles they saw as children. Others chase chaos because stability feels foreign. These aren't romantic decisions. They're neural defaults. And without awareness, they become destiny. But love can also be a mirror for growth. When approached consciously, love becomes the ultimate feedback system. It shows you where you're stuck, what you're afraid of, what you're protecting, and what you're truly capable of feeling. This is why, in spiritual traditions, love is often linked to awakening, not because it's soft, but because it's brutally honest. It brings your shadow to light. That's not a flaw in love. That's the gift. Because in those moments of vulnerability, when you're not performing, not pretending, you glimpse something rare, connection without armor. And that's where transformation begins. But it requires something most people avoid: presence. Real presence, not infatuation, not projection, not fantasy. The kind of presence that holds space for someone without trying to fix them. The kind of presence that can feel their pain without making it about you. The kind that can sit in silence and still feel full. This is not the love we see in movies. It doesn't come with fireworks or violins. It's quiet, subtle, anchored. It doesn't sweep you off your feet. It teaches you how to stand. And that kind of love is rare, not because it's impossible, but because it requires evolution. Not just of biology, but of awareness. A willingness to unlearn everything you've been told. That love should feel like magic. That it should be effortless. That it should complete you. The truth is, real love doesn't complete you. It reveals the parts of you that were missing all along, and then gives you the chance to reclaim them, not through another person, but through the reflection they offer. This is why love is so confusing, because it's not always what you want, but it might be exactly what you need. Not the person, the lesson. And if you're lucky, the person stays. If not, the lesson stays. And that too is a form of love, because love isn't measured in permanence. It's measured in presence. Did you show up? Did you stay open? Did you learn? Did you grow? These are the questions that matter. Not, did it last? But, did it wake me up? And if it did, if love shattered your illusions, cracked your identity, made you feel more deeply than you ever thought possible, then it did its job. Even if it broke you, even if it ended, even if it never looked like the story you imagined. Because love isn't a story. It's an experience, one that bypasses logic, one that confuses science, one that reminds you again and again that you are more than a brain, more than a pattern, more than a system reacting to stimuli. You are something else, something that can't be measured by neurotransmitters or dissected by fMRI scans. You are awareness. And love, when held with awareness, becomes alchemy. It turns pain into understanding, fear into courage, attachment into presence. And when you meet someone who can hold that space with you, not to complete you, not to fix you, but simply to be with you in the storm, you don't just experience love, you become it. You become the field in which love can exist freely, without control, without expectation, without illusion. That's not the kind of love most people chase, but it's the kind that changes everything. So where does that leave us? After all the science, the brain scans, the neurotransmitters, the evolutionary logic, what are we supposed to do with love? Do we dismiss it as an illusion? Do we fear it as a trick of biology? Do we resist it, dissect it, sterilize it with reason? Or do we dare to embrace it, knowing everything? Because maybe real love begins not when you lose yourself in another, but when you find the courage to be fully present, with all your chemistry, your confusion, your fear, and your wonder, without pretending it makes sense. Love isn't supposed to make sense. That's not its function. Love is what happens in the spaces between logic, in the silences between thoughts, in the gaze that lingers just a moment longer than necessary, in the heartbeat that accelerates for no reason, in the ache that says, I see you, even if I don't understand you, I still want to stay. And that wanting to stay, despite the risks, the science, the uncertainty, that might be the most human thing we do. Because you can understand love completely. You can map it, explain it, deconstruct it until there's nothing left but hormones and habits. But you still won't stop hoping that someone, somewhere, will choose to love you anyway. Not because they need to, not because their biology compels them, but because they want to. That's the miracle. Not that we love, but that we choose to love again and again, even when we know how fragile it is, even when we know how easily it can hurt us, even when we know it might not last. We love because something inside us whispers that it's worth it. And maybe that whisper is biology. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's something deeper we haven't named yet. But we listen. And in that listening, we connect. Not just with another person, but with the very part of ourselves that still believes in something bigger than survival, bigger than logic, bigger than us. Maybe that's what love is. Not a chemical lie, but a biological invitation. To transcend the algorithm. To rebel against our wiring. To meet another person, not as a need, but as a choice. And when two people make that choice, consciously, openly, without illusion, but with full awareness, something rare happens. Love stops being a trick and becomes a truth. A truth you live, not because it's perfect, but because it's real, because it's earned, because it's fragile and temporary and unpredictable and still somehow sacred. And maybe that's all we're really looking for in the end. Not certainty, not forever. Just a moment, one real moment, where we feel seen, heard, held, and free. Because in a universe governed by entropy, where everything breaks down, where stars collapse and memories fade, love might be the only thing that chooses to stay, even when it knows better, even when it knows it will end, even when it knows it can't win. It stays. And that is not a chemical lie. That is something we still don't understand. And maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe love isn't meant to be understood. Maybe it's meant to be felt, fully, bravely, briefly. And in feeling it, we remember something the science can't explain, that for all our evolution, our data, our circuitry, we are still human. And to be human is to love. even if it breaks us, especially if it does. Because when it breaks us, we finally see what we're made of. And sometimes what we're made of is love.